Oh, it's a very special Mannequin Chill with myself, Shane Manila. At Shane is the worst. We got Scott Connor with us. He's reading things right now. At Charles Chill FFB. He's the host of Dynasty and Chill. Also the co-host of Mannequin Chill. And Chasing the Helmet. So that's awesome. So yeah, we shout out email this. Nope, not an email. We shout out a tweet because this isn't the 40s. We shout out a tweet this week asking for any audience questions. And everyone ignored my tweet, but they did jump into Scott's DMs and they sent him some questions. So he's going to surprise me with some. So he's going to make me think on my feet, which usually doesn't end well. So I'm excited. What do we got? And how you doing? I guess. How you doing?
I'm doing well. That was a stellar intro. I said, Shane, you're going to need to do the introduction this week, and I think you knocked it out of the park. So we may have to shift rules around where Shane is the driver of the show and the MC for the intro going forward. As you can tell by his facial expression, that's not going to be he's probably going to push back on that. But no, good, man. It's been a whirlwind of a day, week, last couple weeks, and just glad to be here chopping it up with you on Mannequin Chill. So, yeah, interesting throwing out some tweets on interesting topics just to surprise you with. And I said I had two specific responses that I wanted to bring to you and ask you questions. And one of them, well, first, anything up in your life that you wanted to talk about, your dynasty life, your personal life, anything you wanted to shout out before we start?
No, I mean, we're hitting that boring period where I'm looking at rosters and I'm going, I mean, there's nothing wrong with this roster, but I could probably make a trade. So anyone listening to this show, just try to avoid making the summer boredom trades, unless it's a good trade, because then it's a good move. But don't just start tinkering to tinker, because then it's going to end badly.
Well, I mean, let's kind of hit on this before I give you the two mystery topics from Twitter. First thing, I mean, it is kind of a dead period now. We're starting to get some buzz from OTAs, and that's starting to wind down. And there's been some players that have been hyped up. There's been some players that have been seemingly forgotten. Like, you're not even sure if they're still alive or on the team at this point. So we've already seen it. I mean, we've already seen some guys get bumped up. We've seen some guys that the narrative is that they're going to get cut. I mean, LaMichael Pirines a player that I like that might as well just not be alive right now, because everyone's just assuming he's buried, he stinks, he's done, he's fourth string. So player like that I'd been adding going, well, that's an ambiguous backfield. Clearly, that's not how the pecking order appears to be. Then you got other guys like Jacob Harris. You know, Sean McVay talking him up like, this guy can do everything. And now all of a sudden you're going, wow, you know, he's really athletic. He's a fourth-round pick. He's a tight end, so that's even more intriguing. Maybe he's the next Logan. Maybe he's the next Darren Waller. Of course, he's got to be, right? He's a receiver that's listed as a tight end.
He might be as good as Gerald Everett. Oh, wait. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I love camp season because Elijah Moore is already the rookie wide receiver one, so that was pretty cool for him to take that over. We were informed today that Laviska Shenault was running with the ones at Tennessee. Nope, not Tennessee, because that would be a good story. Laviska Shenault's running with the ones in Jacksonville. Yeah, LaMichael Pirine apparently is going to retire because Michael Carter is just that good.
Well, wasn't it funny that a month ago the narrative was Urban Meyer doesn't know Laviska Shenault exists, and his value took a nosedive, and now after the last 2 days, it's Laviska Shenault, the wide receiver one in Jacksonville. We had the discussion in my patron chat, and even in yours. I think both of them it brought up like Laviska Shenault is now worth a first rounder now, and 2 weeks ago it's like, well, I don't even like Laviska Shenault better than the top 6 or 8 receivers in the class. I mean, that's how fast things change, and nothing has changed over the last, 2 days other than news reports or reports from camp. So it's just funny how things change like that. Well, so here's my question for you. We're in the dead period. I don't know if you believe in some of these, some of these narratives that we hear. Obviously, if you can sell players on these narratives, then I'm okay doing it. We've talked about this in the past. Like, can you sell a player for a draft pick? If you can sell Jacob Harris for like a 3rd round pick, cash in and pick up somebody else on the waiver wire, that's a smart move to make. I saw the deal yesterday. Jacob Harris traded for Damian Harris. Like, take it.
Good for
take
you,
it.
Damian. Good for you.
And it was a point per carry league. So even better. Like, give me Damian Harris just as a guy I might be able to use a couple times. And even if Jacob Harris hits, it's like that's one of those like bird in the hand versus what could be 5 years down. Like, take the money now and worry about getting Jacob Harris in another league, probably cheaper than that. So
yeah, I can't imagine that in 3 years you're going to be lamenting the fact that you traded Jacob Harris for anything at all.
Well, and the thing is, if you're in multiple leagues, guess what? You don't have to pay that price for Jacob Harris. You can probably go get him for a lesser player. So if you really like him and you say, well, I don't really want to trade him away because I only had him in 1 or 2 leagues, you can probably go buy him for cheaper than what you got. So still take the deal and just go try to buy him in another league. It's a little more difficult, but you can still net more value than where you started, and you trade him away and you buy him in another. But so here's a question for you, Shane, though. Strategies over the summer, like tactical trade strategies that you're looking at your teams. And I don't want to hear, because I know you will do this sometimes. Like, I'm bored. I want to trade. Let's trade.
Yeah.
But let's say you're looking at a team and you're trying to find an edge based on this time of year. What are you looking for? I mean, I'll give my opinion because you've seen me make a couple deals like this. How are you trying to look at things right now and maybe find an edge that maybe others don't see?
I don't know that I find an edge that others don't see. I mean, I think everyone at this point is in consolidation mode, right? Like, you already the off season, you got all your assets. It was fun. You're like, I have 37, young wide receivers that could all be a wide receiver one. And it's fun to dream about that in June, but come September, October, November, it's more likely that all of those wide receivers are going to be wide receiver 3s. So I'm back in the consolidation business. I guess I'm trading for future picks, but not really because our rookie drafts are over. I'm still looking at veterans that people are still down on for some reason. I guess it's still rookie fever, still in the blood a little bit. So I'm still looking for veterans. Like traded for Michael Thomas yesterday. I actually traded away Robert Woods, but that's a whole other topic. Just consolidation. Nothing too deep. And then I would have to say it is a strategy to stop yourself from blowing up your own roster. Just because it's summertime. Don't do that. It's bad. It's a bad idea.
Yeah, I know it's I've known you for a while, and it's just funny where one day it's like Shane is out and Shane wants to trade, and it's like, let's trade. I have no idea what I'm looking for, but I just need that dopamine rush of like a trade. Like, send me an offer so I can see it in my inbox and be like, I got to trade, and then you take it to another level when you actually hit like accept. You see it come through like Shane has made a trade.
So sometimes I believe in perpetual motion. Sometimes movement causes other movement. So sometimes you don't even know what you want to do with a team, and it's stagnant, right? And then you make a move and you go, all right, well, it looks like I'm going to go in this direction now because I've already started leaning that way. So at least I have a direction, as opposed to, a couple of my rosters I look at and I'm like, I'm not sure. I have no idea. Someone send me something so I can decide if I'm in or out.
So is this the time of the year as teams start to look maybe closer towards the upcoming season, and some of the dynasty managers start to look at redraft leagues as well? I mean, is this the type of time where basically you're willing to sell, even on a contending team, like you'll send a T.Y. Hilton for a third and just get him out just because the window is now, as there might be some sort of buzz for him as a redraft asset? Like, are you looking specifically at like trying to capture the redraft bump a little bit where, Because a lot of the analysis, even on Dynasty podcasts and other Dynasty shows, is kind of shifting more towards like the upcoming season now, because rookie drafts are past. There's only so much content you can put out of, here are my top 12 receivers. Here are my top 12 running backs. Like, we don't do that on this show, but it's also a time where you do have to have some structured content, or you end up kind of just looking towards the next season, because that's what's next up on the horizon. So do you find yourself purposely going out and saying, okay, I have Marvin Jones on this team. What can I get for him? Can I anything for him? Just knowing that it's a declining asset, that probably this is the last chance you're likely going to be able to sell him. Do you ever look at players like that and just take anything you can? Consolidation?
No, because at this point we've made it far enough into close enough to the season where I'm going to get that little bit of value spike for them. I'd rather go ahead and just take the risk that I get some value spike for him, because, you know, we've talked about this before. There's no difference between a third round rookie pick and a fourth round rookie pick. They're both trash. And again, I know everyone drafted Terry McLaurin in their league in the third round. Everyone owns him, apparently. 10% hit rate in the third round. I know you don't like hit rates, but either way, if a guy loses value from third round or fourth round pick, doesn't matter to me. I'd rather hold on to him. Like Tom Brady, people keep sending me second round pick offers in Superflex. Well, I'm not going to make that trade now. I'll wait until the season starts, because worst thing that's going to happen is I'll get that in season. What's more likely is going to happen is it's going to be some quarterback apocalypse. Everyone's going to need a quarterback at some point, and someone's going to come wanting a title, and they'll give me a first for Brady, even if I have to throw in a second. So I think we've made it far enough into the off season. We're close enough to the new season where I don't want to get rid of guys like that. I'm fine moving guys like Chase Edmonds and Mike Davis and maybe Denzel Mims. Some of these second year guys that didn't hit last year, that people still have hope in. Now that the rookie draft is coming and gone, and we kind of see that teams have already moved on from them, like the Jets have moved on from Denzel Mims. Maybe try to cash out on them before everyone else realizes, oh, wait, so the Jets are done with Denzel Mims. That's why they drafted Elijah Moore and signed Corey Davis. Like, it wasn't that they just signed Corey Davis to complement Denzel Mims. Then they went out and drafted Elijah Moore. So stuff like that, players like that, like the writing's on the wall. It might not be plain as day, but it's pretty obvious when you look at the signs. I'd be looking to sell players like that right now.
Yeah, I think it works both ways. I think the one thing to pay attention to is the positional equity. I'm much less apt to trade Mike Davis, Chase Edmonds, Myles Gaskin, because they've already cleared all the hurdles. Now, those are guys I think I have more trade equity. It's still a gamble. Mike Davis could get, signed over top of here in the next 2 weeks. It could happen. Same thing could happen with Myles Gaskin. Like that's still in the range of outcomes for these running backs. But I think the equity on a running back that survives and gets to the season and is getting touches and is producing points, the running backs are the ones I would actually hold. Same with quarterbacks. A quarterback that I can forecast that's going to get some starts, I'd rather have the starts and the trade equity when it's happening. You know what I mean? But the receivers, I mentioned like Marvin Jones, T.Y. Hilton. To me, those are already nondescript pieces that are not impacting my win rate on my team at all. So if someone's willing to give me a pick for one of those guys, especially if I have multiple players in that type of range, I'm okay doing that, even if it is a third round pick. Now, there's going to be certain formats and certain rosters where I go, okay, I don't want to trade Marvin Jones because I have 13 starters in this league, and I can start 9 receivers. So why would I give him away for a third when he could be my wide receiver 7? Wide receiver 7 in another league could be, okay, I have 10 players on my bench that could be my wide receiver 7. So if I trade 2 of them away, it's not a big deal. But I don't really want to trade. I'll trade Chase Edmonds, Myles Gaskin, Mike Davis for a future first or a future second and a lesser running back. We've talked about pivot strategies. Like if you're going to willing to come to me, let's say you want my Mike Davis and you're going to give me Damian Harris in a second or something like that. I think the odds that Damian Harris versus Mike Davis are 60-40, 50-50 in terms of how useful they're going to be. So just because one has a better outlook, if you're going to give me a strong pick on top of it, or at least a kicker pick on top of it, I'll do that. But I don't just want to trade like Myles Gaskin for a second. You know what I mean? I actually think I'd rather wait, take the risk. I have higher equity because I know someone may need a running back during the season. Same with a quarterback. You know, I've actually traded 2 shares of Tyrod Taylor over the last couple weeks. And one of them was a second rounder, and I gave up a third in Tyrod Taylor. Okay.
That's the dream. That is the dream right there. When we talk about selling these players and getting a second rounder, actually using being able to use a pick and a player to move up around. That's perfect.
Well, the other one was a start 11 where I got a third. And, you know, I play a little differently than others because I'm in so many leagues. Like, okay, I have Tyrod Taylor in like 6. Big deal. I traded one away for a third. Like, I honestly forgot he's even on my team until I saw the trade offer. I'm like, oh, yeah, I picked up Tyrod Taylor on waivers. Cool. So, I mean, that type of deal is okay. But if you really think about it, you could argue that Tyrod Taylor's value could go up more in the next 2 months, at least to where his value is not going to go completely down if he gets starts. But I'd be less apt to make that kind of deal with other quarterbacks. You know, like I was just negotiating with somebody today about Drew Lock. Like Drew Lock's really polarizing. He could literally start 10 games next year, or he could not start any because he gets benched, or he doesn't win the job, or they trade for Aaron Rodgers or something like that. So, I mean, the range of outcomes are literally from 0 to, I won't say 100, because I don't think he has an 100 range of outcome. It's probably more like 50. But, you know, someone offered me a third for Drew Lock, and I'm like, well, is 4 starts more valuable than a third? And that's 4 starts that this is a team I have Kyler Murray and Russell Wilson. So is Drew Lock ever getting in over those 2 if they're healthy? No. So that's a question for you. What's worth more in that scenario? Take the third on Drew Lock when I have a very good bet that he's probably not starting after this year, but also the context of the team. He's never going to start during the window where I think he's going to be the starter anyway. Do you take the third, or do you just wait and hope that somebody's desperate and pays a little bit more? What do you do?
So, yeah, and while you're discussing this, while you're talking about players, this is actually what came to mind too. This is when we need to start having conviction in actual players. Like, at least for us, like, okay, theories and strategies, not that they're out the window, but now you need to start, you put all that in place. You did all the off-season work, for the most part. Now you need to actually start betting on the players. Which is why I'm willing to sell Mike Davis and Chase Edmonds. And that's why I'd be more than willing to sell Drew Lock for a third. 4 starts when he's never going to get in on the field over either of those guys. Even if for some reason one of your quarterbacks was to go down and you had to stick Drew Lock in there, that's not really going to help your team any. Like, you'd be better off flexing another position because these are super flex leagues. These aren't 2 QB leagues. We don't have to start a quarterback. You're not forced to start Drew Lock. No one can make you do it, Scott. Remember that. You don't ever have to start Drew Lock again, buddy. Yeah, he's gone. He's a guy I'm not betting on. So, yeah, take a conviction on your players. It's time to start going, okay, is this guy going to be any good? Well, no, he's not. So I'm going to make the move now. Because the only thing that can happen in season is I think his value is going to depreciate because he's going to lose his job to Teddy Bridgewater, or he's going to get benched, or, you know, maybe he wins the job out of camp and then does Drew Lock stuff that he's done his entire career so far, at least of what we've seen, and ends up losing his job anyway to Teddy Bridgewater at some point during the season. So, yeah, he's gone. Say goodbye to Drew Lock. He's bad.
So let's just call it a start 10, 12-team Superflex. So no super scarcity for quarterbacks. It's not like a 16-team 2 QB or anything like that where anyone with a pulse is worth probably a third or better. Do you just trade away Andy Dalton for any third? Smash. Yes. Okay. Mm-hmm. I know you already said this. Tyrod Taylor, any third? Smash.
Yeah, the fact that you got a third for him is just bravo. And, you know, on the inverse of that, or the opposite of that, is I've had people offer me Andy Dalton in leagues where I drafted Justin Fields. And I understand the logic behind it, you know, for a third rounder. And I'm like, no, I'm not paying that for him, because if I have to put Andy Dalton in, my team's already in trouble. Like, it's already bad. He's not going to make a difference. He is not going to help this team. I've lost Justin Fields. The drop from Justin Fields to Andy Dalton, it's going to be pretty stark in fantasy. So that's not going to help me any. And yes, third rounders are worthless as far as when you make the picks, but at least for currency, I'll take that, hold on to that pick and use it for something better.
You made a great point, because I'm in the same boat. I have tons of teams where I drafted Trey Lance and I get these offers of Garoppolo for a second. It's like, nah, I've already bet on Trey Lance, so I don't want to handcuff my Trey Lance, who I probably didn't draft as my top 2 quarterback anyway. So why do I want to handcuff and slide in Garoppolo as my QB3 when I'll just wait for Trey Lance? Same with Dalton. The Fields owner tries to pony off Dalton, and you're like, I just don't really have any interest in Dalton. The other one is, if you have like Winston or Taysom Hill, someone tries to come to you with the other one and saying, hey, do you want both? And that makes sense, because I think both of them have some unique upside, but I look at it, because you and I are in a lot of leagues, I look at it as, I'm already, so I have Jameis Winston on a team, right? I'm already betting on Jameis Winston. So I'm almost kind of giving away a little bit of upside by trading anything of value for Taysom Hill, because this team is already invested in Jameis Winston. So it kind of goes back to the idea of, do you want to handcuff, especially these situations? Winston, Taysom Hill both of them could be drawing dead after 2021. So there's not like you're getting a ton of future equity there to where if either of them move on to another team, they're going to get another shot. It may not happen that way. So I see that a lot too, where someone tries to give you one or the other.
Yeah.
Teddy Bridgewater. Do you buy Teddy Bridgewater for a third?
Do you know what his upside is? Did you see Teddy Bridgewater last year? No.
I think Teddy Bridgewater and Drew Lock are a very poor version of Jameis Winston and Taysom Hill, where I'm betting on one. I don't want the other, because I don't really win if it's like a committee where they switch back and forth. I don't really want to deal with that. I'd rather just ride all on the guy I already have and not give you anything for the other one.
Yeah, the best case scenario is that you make that trade, Teddy Bridgewater wins that job, and he starts all 17 games, and he is the QB 27. Congratulations. QB 77, again, you shouldn't even be starting him in Superflex leagues. 2 quarterback leagues, if you're forced to start 2 quarterbacks, you don't have a choice, fine, it's different. But most of us play Superflex. So, no, I'm fine.
Well, and here's my idea for the move if you're stuck with these. Because, I mean, if you have teams where you have Bridgewater or Locke or Taysom Hill or Dalton or Garoppolo, like you're kind of not sure what to do with those players. So there's one of 2 routes. It's like, I'm just going to collect as many of these guys as I can, and hopefully there's a better sell window. Or do what you're talking about. If you have Andy Dalton, try to set him to Justin Fields owner for a third and see if the owner's smart, they're doing what we're doing and saying, I don't want Andy Dalton if I have Justin Fields. I'm already betting on Justin Fields. Why would I trade for Andy Dalton, even if it's a third? I think the move is, let me get your thoughts on this. If I have Dalton, Locke, Bridgewater, Taysom Hill, insert quarterback that could get starts next year, I actually think the move is to forecast ahead a year. I would actually trade Dalton for Gardner Minshew and a fourth, or Gardner Minshew and Fab, or Drew Lock for Marcus Mariota in a third, or something like that, to where I actually kick this decision down the road next year with a guy that's going to be in the same range as all these players we're talking about next year. I mean, Mitch Trubisky is another one where people hate Mitch Trubisky. I don't mind having him. That's a guy that if there's an injury, I actually might put him in a lineup, given that I know he can run, and he'd be in an offense where, that Buffalo offense with Trubisky might not be terrible for 2 games if he had to play. I don't really want to play Andy Dalton ever, no matter what, even if I'm desperate. You know what I mean? So I think Mariota, Trubisky, Minshew, I actually think these are sneaky pivots, and you might not be able to get a third on top of Dalton for one of those guys. But maybe the Fields owner has Trubisky. Dalton for Trubisky and 50 Fab. A deal like that, I think you could sneak through, and a year from now, you may have the guy that's on the precipice of getting a job or getting another shot, and Dalton isn't. So I think you just kind of kick the decision down the road and, play on the fact that the guy you have could get some starts this year and the guy they have can't.
And and you just hit the nail on the head there, too. It's the perfect, because they still have some narrative juice left. I know we can't quantify narratives, but you kind of can. There's only so many times you can go, well, he's an injury away from being a starter, because it's happened, and we saw what happened. Andy Dalton. Well, he was an injury away from being a starter last year. Before the season, Andy Dalton was a guy I loved. You know what I mean? I said, look, that's a great offense. If he gets in there, he's going to be lights out. Well, he got in there. He was not lights out. So Andy Dalton has shown us my narrative. I've used up all my narratives. I'm done. I have none left. So you can kind of quantify that stuff. Like Teddy Bridgewater is another one of those guys where it's, all right, you've already used this. I've heard this story, you're going to be a starter, and then, you'll have some value, except that we've seen it and it didn't happen. Marcus Mariota still has some narrative, because it's like, hey, did you see that one game he filled in for Derek Carr, right? Derek Carr. Yeah. And then next year, if he sits on the bench all year, it's still going to be, well, he probably learned a lot sitting on the bench the last 2 years. And you remember that one game we saw him when he filled in for Derek Carr? So they still have some narrative left. Whereas, Teddy Bridgewater, Tyrod, guys like that, they have none left. Their stories have been told, and told repeatedly.
Two more players.
Yeah.
Any second for Jordan Love. Smash accept?
Yes. Okay. And that's probably a very bad process, but
I don't think so.
Yeah, he is so bad that I'm comfortable with selling him sight unseen without, most times you're like, all right, well, it's a mobile quarterback. If he gets in there, he's probably going to be able to do something, right? You help his value a little bit. Man, he sounds like he's very bad, very, very bad at football. So
apparently he had a good day today.
He had a good day today. Good for him. Green Bay's receivers, what did they? They all stayed home rather than have to be forced to practice with him one day. The Packers have shown you what they think of him, because they're crawling back to Aaron Rodgers after a year after they wanted to just ship him out of town. They're letting him say whatever he wants, on SportsCenter, Jeopardy, wherever, about the organization, and not even coming close to firing back, because they know Jordan Love is just that bad that they're in a no-win situation, and they have to take Aaron Rodgers' abuse, so that'll come back. So yeah, Jordan Love, any second, he's gone.
Ryan Fitzpatrick, any second.
Yes, gone. Fitz is a wonderful story, but he's never been as good as everyone thinks that he's been. He hasn't. He had really good games in Tampa. 3 really good games. And all of a sudden, this story was created that Ryan Fitzpatrick was this quarterback 1 or something. Unless I was in a coma for a decade. No, he was not a quarterback 1. He's had a couple games that were nice. Every time he's ever been the starter, though, except for last year, most times when he's the starter, he plays down. He loses that job. So yeah, he's gone for a second. Besides the fact that he's 49, I think he's 49 now, give or take. I'm not great with ages.
Well, and we talked a little Andy Dalton. I think Andy Dalton has a chance to be the next Ryan Fitzpatrick, where he just bounces around, and he may not have the luck of Fitzpatrick that just seems to find the starting job 7 straight seasons because the guy ahead of him gets hurt. But if you learn anything from Fitzpatrick, it's if you can get a second for him when he's on the verge of getting starts, take it, because the next year you see him dropped in leagues, you see him going for thirds, and then he works himself back in where it's okay, he could be adequate for half a season, and then he could be worth a second again. But it just makes sense to always cash out on those guys just based on the narrative that, hey, this guy could start a couple games and then worry about it later.
I just wanted to check because, sometimes I could be wrong. Maybe I'm misremembering, remembering things incorrectly. But by my calculus, he's had 2 seasons that were actually useful. 2015 with the Jets, he averaged 17.8 a game. And 2018 with Tampa, he scored 20.7. Everything prior to that was 16 points or fewer. Although he had 17 points a game last year, so he actually wasn't bad, except that Miami didn't want him to start and got rid of him immediately when they could. Sell Ryan Fitzpatrick. If you're holding on to Ryan Fitzpatrick, you're doing fantasy football wrong. I don't want to hear anything. I don't want to hear any counter arguments to that. I don't want to hear about your process if your process includes holding on to Ryan Fitzpatrick for some reason if someone offers you a second rounder.
Well, the theory behind that is that it's the same thing that I talk about all the time with like wide receiver 3s, wide receiver 4s, is not that they're not valuable to have, but they're always available.
Right.
Now, if you're only in one league and you have no quarterbacks and all you have is Ryan Fitzpatrick, like, okay, I understand not just shipping him away for any second. But if you're in, I think a lot of our listeners play in different leagues and they play in multiple leagues. So if you're in 10 leagues and, you're not literally depleted at quarterback, the idea isn't that you don't want to trade Ryan Fitzpatrick. It's that the players at the Ryan Fitzpatrick level, whether it's him or insert name during the season that could start for 2 weeks, they're always available. Those guys are usually available, meaning like you may have to pay a little bit of a price, but they're always available. And it's the same thing with wide receiver 3s. Like one of my strategies that we kind of talked about, summer strategies, is I go through my teams and I go, okay, Tyler Lockett, Jarvis Landry, Robert Woods. Like I'll trade those guys for, if I have someone willing to give me a first for Robert Woods, I'll smash accept it. And you know why? It's not because I don't want Robert Woods, and it's not because I don't think Robert Woods can be good, and it's not because my team doesn't need Robert Woods. It's that there's another Robert Woods that's probably available if I ever wanted to give up that first for Robert Woods or insert players similar to him. So there's always going to be somebody that's going, this guy's a 29-year-old wide receiver 2. Who wants it? Who wants him? You know what I mean? Like I can always throw a first for receivers in that range. May not be Robert Woods, but it's probably going to be somebody that I can buy for that price during the season. You can't necessarily do that at quarterback or running back. If you're trying to get any sort of investment, you can't just go buy, like give me a running back right now that you think is worth a square first, straight up. Chris
With
Carson.
Nothing else added?
Chris Carson.
No. Miles Sanders.
Miles Sanders. Okay. So those are 2 perfect examples. So Miles Sanders, maybe you can buy him for a first right now, right? Now, if Miles Sanders starts to hit during the season, you can't buy him for a straight up first.
No.
Right?
Right.
Now, Chris Carson hits during the season and the team doesn't need Chris Carson, or the team is 2-5 and they stuck with Chris Carson, they will sell him.
Right.
Now they may say, well, no, I want 2 firsts. Okay, buddy, hold on to him. You can ride him out until that's not very smart process. But guys like Chris Carson, even on a lower end, somebody like Ronald Jones, you know what I mean? You can buy him probably for a second. But I think during the season, no matter what he does, you can probably buy him for a second and a third. You know what I mean? It's a very marginal incline or increase during the season, just because his value has already capped out.
Right.
So they're not hard to buy. So why would you pay the premium now? If anything, I cash out for the premium now. Maybe I don't need to buy a Robert Woods during the season and I have an extra first and I still can compete. That's the dream. But I have the insurance if I need to buy one later.
I like it.
You like it? Thank you, Shane.
I like it. You're smart.
So the next thing I wanted to bring up, and this is something that's a little riskier, but when I get bored, I try to look for the smallest of edges, those game theory edges that we talked about. If anyone listened to my last Dynasty and Chill with Dino Game Theory, this is literally what we talked about the whole episode. But I've been on this kick, and you can use one of those cool tools with DLF that has like player values. They give you like numbers with player values. I've literally been going to people in my leagues and I go, okay, well, DLF or whatever tool you use. I also use Dynasty Nerds. I know they're a competitor of ours, but shout out, Dynasty Nerds has a cool tool for this too. But I literally look at it and I say, okay, it says Dynasty and Chill is the number 1 team. And it says, Dynasty Trade HQ is the 12th place team. So what do I have to do to trick you to swap first with me? What can I throw to you? So I send out those offers, and I'll send – I sent one the other day. I won't name names, but I sent one the other day to another prominent podcaster, and I gave him a first, a second, and a third, or a first, a second, and a throw-in piece for a first. And without knowing any of the context, you're like, what am I missing here? Like a first and a second and a piece for a first? And so it's almost like challenging the other person to bet on their own team to beat yours, or at least to finish close enough to yours that they don't give up a massive difference in draft picks. But I think there's an angle with that. I just did one today where I have the best team in the Devy League, and this other team was the worst team. I literally ran both teams through. Best team, worst team. And I threw him a trade for a Devy depleted pick. I threw in Darnell Washington, who's a Devy tight end. Okay, decent player, but I'm sitting there going, even if it's a super depleted Devy league, if I have the 101 or the 102, a guy's going to slip through the cracks. The 112 is like Javian Hawkins or Elijah Mitchell. It's a guy where I'm like, I don't even have roster room for him. Like, that's the stark difference, and I don't think the other player realized the gaps between those picks. And if that ends up being, the 101 for the 112, I mean, you just got literally the value of like 3 firsts for 1. So I think moves like that, I mean, you can look at it different ways, but I typically look at other teams' quarterbacks and I go, your QB1 is Deshaun Watson and your QB2 is Ryan Fitzpatrick. And let's bet. I'll bet my team against yours. What do I got to give me the odds? You know what I mean? How can I get your first next year? So things like that, I think you can make moves if you're bored. This is more of like a boredom strategy, but if you're bored, you can find edges there. You can find edges.
Look, if you're confident in your roster, it's a good move. And it's a good move because a lot of people are still in that phase of that honeymoon phase of the offseason where my team's fine. My team, look, everything's going to break right for my team. Like there's no way that Laviska Shenault's not going to be a wide receiver 1. Clearly, Jamar Jefferson is going to. I keep combining his with the Jefferson. The other Justin, Jamar Chase is going to come out like a house on fire. Trey Lance will probably start week 1. Trey Sermon, running back 1, book it. Mike Davis, no. He's going to at least 1,600 yards this year. So I like that strategy. If you're looking at the team and you're using whatever scorer you're using, because it's objective. It's more objective than you. It's more objective than just your eyeballs and going, I think I'm better than them, although you can probably tell. But, still use something objective. I like it. You're betting on yourself and betting against someone else. And I like betting against other people. And betting on ourselves.
Well, and what's the worst that I lose if I lose that trade? I lose... let's say instead of the 101 and the 112, I end up trading the 106 for the 107. And I lose a second round pick, right? I lost a second round pick. I mean, how many – I joked with my wife earlier today about this. Like, I went to the convenience store and spent like $12 on like an energy drink and a snack. You know what I mean? Like we make bets all the time just – for immediate needs. You know what I mean? Like, okay, I had some fun with this trade and I lost a second round pick. You're not going to win all of them. But it just kind of look at it as like the expense of having some fun. You know what I mean? So I don't think there's not a lot to lose, honestly. Like, big deal. You lose a second round pick. You lose a third round pick. You lose a throw-in player. And especially that league, I think that league I made that deal, I sent Tevin Coleman as a throw-in in the deal. And I picked up like Duke Johnson. So I'm like, the range of outcomes really aren't that different between the two. I mean, Duke Johnson has to get on a team, but he signs somewhere tomorrow and it's like, I might like him over Tevin Coleman. And
yeah, I got to be honest with you. I don't, even if he doesn't sign anywhere, I don't know that he scores less points than Tevin Coleman this year. Because Tevin Coleman's pretty bad.
I think the idea is I freed up a roster spot to go and pick up anybody, which isn't that far off from the value gap that I gave up to bridge the trade on the bet anyway. So just something to think about that you can do if you're I think this is a fun league to kind of maybe send to a rival in a league. You know what I mean? Like, hey, man, I like your team. You like mine. We like to talk trash with each other. Let's swap first and see if anything, if they decline, they're admitting that they think you have a better team than they do.
So here's what I will say. I'm probably more apt to do this in a lower stakes league than a higher stakes league because I believe fate exists and sometimes bad things just happen. You know, my team can look great because we've all had teams before the season. We've looked at them and gone, this team's pretty bad. This team's got no chance. And then it wins a championship and you're like, I don't really know how that happened. You look back at the team, after the season and you still don't know how it happened. And you have other teams. You're like, there's literally no way I can lose. And you don't make the playoffs. Even though, you score the fourth most points in the league. It happens. I don't want to tempt fate like that in a large buy-in. So I'll be a little more conservative than you there. But a $30 league where I just want to talk trash to someone, yeah, I could do that. We'll get into that topic one day. But, the whole, you get to draft your opponent's draft picks in the startup.
Yeah. So does this change a little bit if it is a potential points league where you really don't have as much control over your draft pick? You can't tank to the bottom. So if you have a strong team, even if you miss the playoffs, you're fairly confident that your potential points is going to keep you outside of the top, 3 or 4 slots. So you're not giving away the 101. But it also makes you feel like, okay, even if I have a team that, let's say I start out 0-5, right? Like I'm sure you've had those leagues where you start out 0-3, 0-4, and you're like, my potential points is in the top 5. Like, whoa, I'm just getting crushed on bad luck. But you feel helpless in those leagues because you don't really have a way to get to the bottom because you have too good of a roster. But you don't want to just blow up your team to try to get to the bottom knowing its potential points. So in those leagues, I'm kind of thinking my firsts are more random than I want to give it credit for, regardless of how good my team is. So you can look at the other person's team and say, yeah, I don't know if there's a lot of potential points on this team. Like, even if my team is worse than yours, if we both miss the playoffs, potential points may put me over yours. So I think, does that change at all if you know the structure of how the draft picks are determined, or do you even think that far?
I mean, the potential points are just, no, it's still going to be too much. I'm believing too much. Again, smaller scale league, smaller buy-in. I'm willing more to play around a little more. I'm going to be a little more conservative when it's a larger buy-in or a league that means a little bit more to me. Like, one of the HQ leagues. I probably wouldn't do that because I'm not risking anything. I just want to win those leagues. Well, and also if it's an HQ league, like you could put yourself in a position where you're the butt of future jokes. Like, oh, hey, Shane got real cocky and made me this offer and he just traded away, Spencer Rattler. That's the 101 next year. And yeah. So you kind of put yourself out there that if this goes wrong, then you're the one that gets trolled by that person going forward. Like, hey man, great trade. Let's do another one like this. It worked out good for you because you're the one that's being kind of there's a little bit of an ego when I make these offers. If I send you your first for my first plus, like I'm basically saying, hey man, like you want to make a friendly bet? Who can run faster? Who can jump higher? Like I'm better than you. So, I could see where it could backfire on you from a publicity perspective if it goes wrong. I would really like, and it's too bad we didn't do it this year. I got to find a startup next year where we can draft our opponents' future draft picks because that's more up my alley. I like that, just projecting against an opponent long term without even a roster being built. Just going, I know you're bad at Dynasty football. I know you're going to be bad, so I'm just going to start taking your picks. Or even after, 4, 5, 6 rounds in, you go, oh, you're not doing very well. Okay, I'm going to go start taking your 2023 first round draft picks and then your 2024. That would be fun. We're going to have to set that up. No, I think that's maybe like a podcast rivals league where you get 12 podcasts in there and, you
you put both the next 2 years of each podcast first in the drafts, and there we go. Third round of the startup. I'm drafting the HQ podcast first, going, I've listened to these guys. I don't know. I think they're going to screw it up. So let me take their first. Like you're making a statement by making those picks. I like that. I love that idea. Oh, you're making my brain spin, Shane.
Yeah, I'm about to send the tweet out now.
Hey, it's fun to have. I've looked at Dynasty the last year a lot more than I ever had before, of just literally looking at everything in terms of odds. And I know I talk about betting odds a lot of times, but it truly is, every decision you make, whether it's a trade, a waiver pickup, a draft pick, any of this, like you're just betting odds. And the best part about it is you don't even know what the odds are. You don't know. It's not like I'm giving you 2-1. It could be 2-1. It could be 1-2. The other way, you don't know. You're literally just trying to justify it in your mind, like, this is my perception, this is my hypothesis, and it either works or it doesn't. But it makes it more fun, definitely.
Yep.
All right, so I have one listener question for you.
Okay.
And we've kind of talked about this in other podcasts, like going through extreme formats like this. So I wanted to combine these two questions, and I'm sorry for the people that tweeted these, because I think we could go down a rabbit hole that's another 2 hours if we go down this this road. But so let's just say a 12-team Superflex with 10 starters, okay? Pretty typical. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2 flexes, a Superflex. 10 starters. Pretty cookie cutter in the Superflex world. You can only pick 5 spots on that roster. Let's just assume it's pretty standard scoring. Everything else you basically have to punt. So where Dynasty stands right now, 5 roster spots on your team. What are you prioritizing going into the startup? And I kind of know your answer, but say you have 10 starting spots. Mm-hmm. A quarterback, 2 running backs, 3 receivers, a tight end, 2 flexes, and a super flex. Yep. You basically can only pick 5 players that you can name. Everything else you have to punt. You either have to pick up on waivers or just pick guys in the startup. Like, you don't really get to pick your players. You just get to pick whatever's left over, pretty much. What are the most important core places, how you're building a team that you want to focus on that you don't have to worry about? You'll worry about streaming everything else.
So obviously it's going to be quarterback, super flex, tight end, and then both my running backs over my flex and wide receivers. Probably should be a flex, but whatever. Again, it's a flex. I can find this.
So you'd opt to do the RB2 over your wide receiver 1 in terms of prioritizing that. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't want to get too deep on that, but that was a question that we got. I thought it was interesting, but I think it also comes down to the reason I said we could go into the weeds is I would say, well, give me 4 quarterbacks and then I'll trade. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think, and that's where my mind goes too, because my running back 2 is going to be a top 10 running back, and my QB2, my super flex, is going to be a top 12 quarterbacks. Yeah, that's interesting. We should follow up on that some more.
Even in a stock PPR, you'd still go with the tight end advantage, Kelsey, Kittle, whatever it would be.
Yeah. The tight end position is probably the one position where you can really gain that edge, right? And you have to. It's really finite, and it's almost, and which guys are going to do it. It's going to be Kelsey, Pitts, Waller, and Kittle, right? Like, you can almost bank on it. Someone else might jump in there. Mark Andrews might jump up, right? Noah Fant might jump up, but there's too many guys after that first 5 that are just guys that are all in that same bag that I don't know who's going to be what. So let me get that tight end squared away.
I like it. I can't argue with it. Even in, the measuring the positional advantages, I think is becoming more and more prominent. You have a lot of people. Best ball seems like it's been a big topic this year. Strategy with best ball, and you talk about different ways to find advantages no matter what the scoring is. And I think that is the tight end landscape. Like, as much as I used to say, hey, I don't really value a Darren Waller or Travis Kelsey in a PPR league, it's like, I'm getting a 2-1 advantage over the average in the league, and that's hard to pass up compared to the replaceability of their position. So I can't argue with that. I may lean towards maybe going with 2 receivers if I can get literally 2 like dominant receivers. You know what I mean? But that's tough. I think it works both ways. I would definitely only go with 1 running back. I think the RB2s are – this season will be a big test of this strategy, but I think we're leaning more towards and this is maybe a topic if we have a Devy person come on. Maybe we'll grab a Devy person from DLF to come on and talk a little Devy. But I think we're seeing a shape shift in the running back landscape in Dynasty where these guys coming up, they're not being prepped to be bell cows anymore. Like the new wave of running backs are I don't want to use Travis Etienne, but the Miles Sanders, Travis Etienne, like those guys are guys that are going to go high in drafts because of their skill set, but they're not bell cows. They never were in college. They never were even in high school. So they're focusing more on like being able to develop these guys at an early age to run routes, to pass block, to do all these things that make them a dynamic weapon. But I think gone are the days where it's like, oh, that guy's 5'11", 230 pounds, and he can handle 290 carries a season. Like, I just don't think running backs are being developed that way anymore because most teams are not using them that way. They don't use them that way in college. And now in the NFL, you're starting to see many, many more committees to where very few teams even value guys that can get 300 carries. So I don't know. It'll be an interesting shift, but I don't think that the typical bell cow as we know it, it's going to be scarce if you can get them, but I don't think we should bank on a lot of these Devy guys fitting that mold going forward. I think there's going to be a lot more guys like Travis Etienne going forward.
Well, and I just real quick, I touched on this for the last couple of years. I've said this too, though. The new bell cow is going to be different. It's not going to be 25 rushing attempts. It's going to be 25 opportunities. Quite frankly, we'd rather more of their opportunities be targets because a target's worth more than a rushing attempt, blah, 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 blah. So, yeah, I think, we're well on that path where, no, you're not going to, you're going to have your freaks of nature, Derrick Henry. The guy's 6'4", 260 pounds, and he runs like a cheetah. All right, you should give that guy the football 30 times a game. You should throw him the ball some too, but that's a whole other topic. But, yeah, you have more guys that are kind of built like Etienne and Sanders, where they don't have those real thick, juicy butts, right? Like the old school running backs. They're more agile, right? They're more of a shifty type of player, but you can use them in different ways that you couldn't use the old running backs. Like you couldn't split Emmitt Smith out wide. I guess you could. It just wouldn't fool anyone and no one would be concerned. You can split Sanders out wide. You can split Etienne out wide. And there's a lot more running backs that you can do that with. Even a few years ago, if you remember, it was a big deal that Le'Veon Bell used to run so many routes. Now it's commonplace. We expect it.
Yeah, I actually think the new bell cow is a guy maybe like an Aaron Jones prototype where he's a really good in between the tackles runner. He's big enough to where he doesn't get pushed around. He doesn't go down on first contact, but you kind of always felt like we're going to look back on Aaron Jones's career and probably say, damn, that guy was real good for like 5 or 6 years. He had multiple top 10 seasons. But what do you hear constantly? Well, why don't they give him the ball more? Why don't they play him more snaps? And it's like, that was never the intent. Even if he would have been a second round pick, the intent was never to overload him with a Christian McCaffrey workload. Like it was never in the range of outcomes. So we kind of look at a guy like Aaron Jones and go, he left a little meat on the bone, but I'm like, he's probably as good as he was because of the way he's used.
Do you want to see what Aaron Jones would be with a heavy workload? Look at Lamar Miller in Houston. Lamar Miller in Miami was Aaron Jones light. Why isn't he getting the ball more? He's so explosive when he gets the ball. Like, he's great. By the time his career was over at Houston, the dude was just a straight plotter. So, yeah, I learned my lesson from Lamar Miller. Look, yes, I want them to get every touch while the game's going on. But when I pull back, I can go, all right, you know what? It's probably best that they work Jamal Williams in there a little bit because he wouldn't have been as efficient and he probably wouldn't have scored 16 touchdowns or whatever he did if they ran him, if they tried to run him like Derrick Henry.
Well, and if I told you that the next Aaron Jones, whoever it might be, and I said he'll never have a season where he touches the ball more than 270 times, which isn't a lot in today's game. I mean, it's a lot relative to the rest of the running backs, but there are still probably a dozen players a year that are going to get more touches, right? But if I told you this player is never going to be in the top 12 in a given season in touches, but they have the range of outcomes to be a top 5 running back, like, it makes you a little queasy because you have to probably bet on good game strips, touchdowns, a quarterback or an offense that likes to throw the ball to the running back. But like, I think those efficiency monsters, and the hard thing is we can't necessarily identify them based on their size, speed, and how they test at the combine. So a lot more weight's going to have to go into what are their skill sets. What offense do they get dropped in? I mean, I think those things are going to matter a little bit more. So it's just an interesting discussion. That's the reason why I said I'm leaning more towards, if I have some teams where maybe this is another show we could do in the future too. I plan on actually doing a Dynasty and Chill on this, but these teams where I have like 2 or 3 running backs last year from the 2020 class, if I have a team that has like Jonathan Taylor, Dobbins, and Antonio Gibson, I'm actually okay cashing out on one of those guys just because I can cash out at such a high price. I'm okay kind of slimming down some of my rosters. I don't need 4 great running backs going into the season. I'll pick my spots to cash out and kind of make me take some of these bets on guys that, I'm not saying they're the next Aaron Jones, but I think there's going to be a lot more running backs that are relevant in the next couple seasons than we're anticipating. So just food for thought for maybe a future episode.
I like it. We're planning a future episode. So we're going to be back because we've planned like 6 future episodes already and a live stream. We're doing a live stream at some point.
Yeah.
I got the okay from Madison. So.
Yeah, they trust us to go live after like 18 months.
Yeah, if you want us to go live, hit the comments thingy. It's a comment below. All right, so make sure you subscribe or prescribe, whatever. Subscribe to @DLF Football, DLF Football, not DLFF. No, it's just DL Football, right? That's how you're right. It gets you every week, so it's just @DL Football. Because if you try to go follow @DLF Football, I don't know who that'll be, to be honest with you. So follow @DL Football, @Charles Chill FFB, @Shane is the worst. Make sure you retweet this video when it comes out and tell everyone how awesome it is, and tell Scott how smart and handsome he is. And anything else, Scott?
No, that's a great way to close the show. Shane is going to be the opener and the closer going forward just because it's so smooth. But yeah, everything you said, good time, man. Good show.
All right.
More stuff for the summer plan. Hit us up if you have any ideas. So appreciate you all. Later, DLF.